Balake, where is Balake at?
My name's Blake.
Do you want to go to war, Balake? I'm for real. Ron.
Ron is here, everyone. Thank you for joining me. And I am joined today by Alexa Nikolas. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I feel like I'm still getting used to having two children, but other than that, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I'd gotten so many messages about you and the event, the protest that you're staging on L. Ron Hubbard Way in Los Angeles. 3 days from today, it's on Thursday, right?
It's on Thursday on the 28th.
And what time will it be starting?
It's going to be at 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. So I usually have them in that little like lunch break time of day. So if people are working, if they want to come to the protest on their lunch break, it's open. That's usually how I do it.
Okay, great. Just for everyone watching, I want to direct you to Alexa's YouTube channel. It's under her name, and the handle is Eat Predators. And we're going to talk about that in a moment here. And then you can also find her on Instagram at Eat Predators as well. So Alexa, some of my younger viewers will recognize you from the Nickelodeon show Zoe 101, right? I'm a little too old to have seen that, but I did ask my daughters. I have 3 daughters. I said, "You guys know that show Zoe 101?" And they're like, "Yeah."
That's a big even the younger generation knows it. That's actually shocking to me. I didn't know that.
And so I first saw your name, I think, when the Jonah Hill stuff was breaking a month or 2 ago, and you had told a story about something that happened between you and Jonah back then, and that's when I first became aware of you.
Okay.
What made you want to do this Scientology event?
You know, when I started watching the Danny Masterson trial, like reading articles about it as a survivor, it was very, triggering, but also it was very familiar to how e-predators started. Like I started e-predators to not only protest predators, but also to protest these institutions that were covering up SA. And so the more that I was reading about Scientology, it really started to mirror that same institutional issue where a predator gets in, he's making them money or not just working there. And then the institution will actually cover up for that individual. And so that's how e-predators started. As a survivor, I'm a survivor of the music industry. And I saw how my abuser's management firm covered up for him intensely. And at first, during my healing journey, I was very focused on obviously my predator. But then as I started to learn more and more, I started to see that it was a bigger issue, that the enablers were really what were allowing him to continue and gain more access to victims. And so that's what really drew me to Scientology, is I saw the same thing happening there, honestly.
Amazing. In Scientology, because of the cult aspect of it and it being a high control group, and it's very easy for Scientology management to control the behavior and the information and the thought and the emotions of its members. To me, it seems very easy for this kind of stuff to be covered up and victims to be silenced in Scientology. What are the similarities that exist in, like, for example, the music industry?
Well, NDAs would be number one. You can see I have one of these protest signs behind me. But NDAs are like a sure way that most institutions cover up SA. I've just seen that time and time again. And then within the music industry, what I really started to notice is that at the top, there was predatory behavior. Like e-predators isn't just about SA predators. It's just about predatory behavior in general. And that can just be someone exploiting someone's weakness, exploiting someone's income. The list goes on and on and on. And so I started to notice that at the top, there were predators, maybe not SA predators, but predators in general. And that's what was allowing them to almost relate and understand and cover up for the SA predators underneath them. And again, when I look at Scientology, if I look at David, for example, or just cult-like structures, it seems like there is predatory behavior happening at the top, and it starts to trickle down from the top all the way down to the bottom. And so I really saw that similarity right away. So it's usually through like legal threats, NDA cover-ups, and then you got some type of predator running the institution that is relating and wanting to protect the other types of predators underneath them. If that
Yeah.
makes any sense.
It is. It is. You know, I've because my experience is limited somewhat to the Scientology stuff, but I have started to wonder
Yeah.
recently whether this type of behavior and the covering up for this type of behavior is kind of just systemic anywhere where you have concentrated power. Um,
Yes.
you know, like
Yes.
the music industry and the movie industry do get so much attention, and
Right.
I'm like, but you know what? It's probably festering in the halls of power in other areas that are just honestly better protected. Like whether we're talking about the
100%.
hedge fund world or the world of politics,
Right.
people seem to expect it from Hollywood, but I bet it's happening even more so in the industries where you would least expect it.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I feel like predators in general, any type of power that they get, they exploit the power. They do abuse of power in general. And that can happen at a Denny's, for example, with a manager running Denny's. You know, if you have a predator in there or somebody that's more drawn to predatory behavior, then you're going to have someone exploiting that power even in a diner setting. I don't think it just happens in these huge, powerful institutions. I think it actually is everywhere we look. It can even be a teacher-student dynamic. And predators usually try to go to spaces where they can gain power so that they can exploit that power, but also exploit those around them. But you're right. I don't think it's just Hollywood. I don't even think it's just cult-like structures. I think it could be anywhere, even sadly parent-child dynamics, you know, people that come from abusive families. I think it's right there as well. Someone can be like, oh, I feel I have this authority, this power being a parent, and they'll exploit that type of power. I still think that's still predatory behavior, in my opinion. That,
Yeah,
for
that
me.
makes sense. Someone in
Yeah.
the comments section here pointed out that in the King of Queens television show, you played the younger version of Leah Remini's character.
I did. Isn't that so weird? And here we are. And here we are. Yeah, that was actually a really fun shoot. It was so easy. I think I had like 3 lines in King of Queens, honestly. But I loved Leah Remini when I was younger, so playing her younger was like a dream. I had like a blast being on that show. And Ben Stiller's dad was in it too. And I worked with Ben Stiller as well, and he was a super nice guy. It was a great set environment, to be honest. I enjoyed working on King of Queens.
That's amazing.
I
So
love that someone noted that.
I know, right? So what is the focus, if there is a focus, but
Yeah.
what is the focus of the event or the demonstration of or the protest?
So it's a mixture. Obviously, I definitely am going there because of the cover up of SA that I had seen during the Danny Masterson trial. So that's really number one for me as a survivor. Second, I also heard about NDAs and e-predators. We do not like any type of NDA that covers up criminal like behavior or just criminals like in general. And then I would say the third is that David, to me, I guess I can just say this on your channel. I just see he's a predator to me. That's how I feel when I look into him. It's my personal opinion, but looking at the structure of how he operates that institution, what he seems to be like as an individual, how he can get physical with his staff, etc. To me, waving serious red flags of predator vibes. And so I don't feel comfortable having him as my neighbor. The blue buildings are very close to me. And so as a mom, I just kind of want that type of behavior out of my neighborhood, to be quite honest with you. And then I would say number 4 is obviously I started I started talking about where is Shelly. And I know we also spoke a little bit about that. And for me, it wasn't about her necessarily being not alive, for me, but it just felt it just felt wrong that somebody isn't allowed to be, even if she's willingly doing that, something just strikes me as odd that someone's not able to be part of the outside world. And that's for not just Shelley, but I think everybody that's in that environment, you know, even if they feel like they're willingly doing it, which I'm sure in their mind they are, but if they came from a culture of what we like to say brooming, because we can't say that word on YouTube, but if they've been broomed, you know, into these environments, can we honestly say that they're willingly, you know, being kept away? And as a survivor, I don't feel comfortable with necessarily saying that it is willingly. I understand that she has autonomy over her own body and can do what she wants to, but something just strikes me as wrong about that.
Yeah.
It just doesn't feel right when someone doesn't feel like they can connect with the outside world. It just it feels like an abusive relationship, and I was in one. I was broomed at the age of 16 and got into a fraudulent marriage with a predator, and I saw the same tactics with him where he would isolate me from everyone around me, you know, like my family, my friends, and it felt like us against the world type of behavior. And I really see that in cult dynamics as well, where the cult leader will really create this type of disconnection from the outside world and make an enemy, you know, out of it. And to me, that's an abusive relationship. And so for Shelley, that's how I feel about the Shelley scenario, is that even if she is, which I'm sure that she is willingly, you know, maybe being somewhere, I don't know if that's necessarily acceptable though. If
No,
you
I
have,
think it's
you
I think
know,
it's a great
freedom.
point. I mean, when you said earlier, sort of, I think you said anyone can be a predator, exploiting even the difference in power dynamics or income or whatever.
Yes.
In David Miscavige, what you have is someone. I mean, you couldn't have a
Yes.
better description of him exploiting. You want to talk about a difference in power dynamics? I mean, he can banish
Oh
someone
God.
to the other end of the world just for a perceived slight. And I think when we're talking about
Wow.
when you're talking about Shelley Miscavige, you know, even if she's someone who's like, I believe L. Ron Hubbard is coming back, I'm dedicated to
Mhm.
Scientology, I'm dedicated to L. Ron Hubbard. You know, the way Miscavige would be exploiting that is to go,
Right.
I can do whatever I want to this person, send them wherever I
Right.
want, assign her to do whatever I want, and she's got no
Right.
choice but to take it because she's committed to L. Ron Hubbard, and she would rather spend the rest of her life, cleaning pots than to abandon L. Ron
Right.
Hubbard so I can treat her however I
Right.
want, you
Right.
know?
And there's
And
the exploitation.
yeah,
He
right.
he the predators like to find weaknesses, and maybe you and I wouldn't see that as a weakness, like Shelley's devotion towards Scientology, but a predator will see that as a weakness because they can basically, what you just said, have them do whatever they want because of their devotion towards, you know, something like Scientology. And so for him, it's a weakness. To us, we might see it as, wow, this person's really devoted and works really hard, you know, yada yada yada. But for him, he's seeing that he can make a power move with that person and have them do whatever he wants. And that's what gets scary for me. That's what freaks me out about predators in general. Like in general, because we don't see certain things as weaknesses, but they will.
That's
They
it.
definitely will.
I'm really glad you described it that way. I honestly hadn't really
Yeah.
thought about it that way before. You know,
Mhm.
yesterday I was having a chat with my friend
Yes.
Sterling. We were talking about this guy named Russ Bellin, who's the head. He was
Right.
the head of CST. You and I were talking earlier about this base that Shelley Miscavige
Yes.
was last known to be at.
Yes.
And he was the head of that organization. And legally speaking, in the eyes of the government, he was one of the only people who actually has the power to remove David Miscavige. And
What?
yet David Miscavige had this guy thrown into the hole and subjected to all sorts of horrible punishments, even though Russ could have just told him to F off. But it's the dedication to L. Ron Hubbard. It's the
Right.
dedication to Scientology. When you pointed out that what a Scientologist or a former Scientologist might see as a strength, a predator goes, no, they see that as a weakness and they're going to exploit that
Correct.
weakness.
Correct. And that's why I try to explain to people too on my channel where, you know, it's not necessarily these spaces that are dangerous. Like we can't say like the music industry is just a dangerous place, or like, you know, music or bars or art in general. It's not really about the spaces being dangerous. It's about what a predator can find as a weakness in spaces that we have to be aware of collectively and as bystanders as well, because they literally will sniff it out. And if they find even one bit of a weakness somewhere, they guaranteed they're going to exploit that. And I know on your live, you were talking about the differences between L. Ron Hubbard and David Miscavige, and how obviously they're both, in my opinion, like cult leaders. But the way that David goes about it is way more aggressive. Is that the proper word to say? Like
Probably.
he's more aggressive. He's more like, in my opinion, like an obvious predator. Even though he puts on the mask at his like big speeches, I saw all of those. He definitely has the charisma of a narcissist or like a predator. But at the same time, you can kind of tell that he's a little cutthroat. Like he's got a little bit more of an edge than I saw with like L. Ron Hubbard footage. Would you agree with that, or am I wrong?
Well, totally. And with the caveat that, I never knew or worked with L. Ron Hubbard. I never worked with David Miscavige, but I'll tell you the best description I've heard from Mike Rinder, who worked with both of them, is, L. Ron Hubbard was a lot of horrible things. He was a liar. He was a bigamist. He was a manipulator. He was a con artist. He was whatever.
Yes.
But despite all of that,
yes,
he seemed to actually genuinely care about the people in his environment and the people that he worked with. He also seemed to believe his own bullshit eventually, right? Like he wasn't just
right.
He might have been conning people in the beginning, perhaps, but by the end, he was conning himself for sure.
Right. No, that happens. That totally happens.
And Mike Rinder has said that Miscavige is actually the opposite of that. Miscavige detests everyone he works with.
Interesting.
That he truly does not care about the well-being of even the most senior leadership echelon in Scientology. He constantly denigrating them and abusing them and seeing them as a threat. And he said L. Ron Hubbard, for all that L. Ron Hubbard was, he wasn't like that. Take for whatever that's worth.
Right. And it seems like David, like even if L. Ron Hubbard had traits of, obviously he's a cult leader of predatory behavior, it seems like David like preyed on that, like preyed on a predator, which is like kind of wild. That takes it to a whole new level. Like he really has the nerve. He was like, I'm going to take on a predator. And he saw like an other predator as prey.
You totally nailed it. That totally nailed it. Because the last 6 years of L. Ron Hubbard's life, he was off in seclusion, right? And
was he really?
Yeah, he was off in seclusion. He had two people with him, Pat and Annie Broker. He had a doctor, Eugene Denk. He had an assistant guy named Sarge. And there might have been one other person I'm forgetting. But this guy, Pat Broker, who was with L. Ron Hubbard, Pat Broker and David Miscavige and Pat Broker were the people who would secretly meet and exchange information. So anything they could manipulate L. Ron Hubbard by just feeding him information, because the only information that L. Ron Hubbard would ever receive came from David Miscavige and would either be passed on or filtered by Pat Broker. And vice versa. Any information from L. Ron Hubbard for the last 6 years of his life, 80 to 86, would come from Pat Broker. Miscavige would filter out whatever he didn't. And so they could manipulate L. Ron Hubbard, just the two of them this way. And this is part of what led to Miscavige taking full control of Scientology.
I sniffed that out myself without even knowing that detail. I was like, this feels like exactly what I think it is. That's so wild. So he was getting all of his information basically from David.
Yeah. So David, if he wanted someone if he wanted someone in Scientology taken out under orders of LRH, he would feed LRH false information about stuff this person was doing. And LRH, LRH wasn't smart enough to realize he was being manipulated, but he was also losing his faculties later on in his life.
Like he didn't realize that he was being preyed upon because maybe he was so used to preying on others. That's, like David.
Or maybe he thought so much of himself he didn't think he could be manipulated.
Totally. And
because it seems so obvious.
Right. And then you got David being like, that's a weakness.
Yes.
Where we would see that as a strength, David's viewing that as a weakness. And he was right. It was a weakness because he was able to slide right on in there.
And when L. Ron Hubbard died, David Miscavige had a celebration. an actual
What are you
celebration.
talking about? What did he do? Pop
They
bottles? Like,
couldn't
what kind of
wait for him to
celebration?
die. They couldn't wait for him to die.
Right, because they wanna take it over.
Yes, and it was actually Pat Broker and his wife Annie who were supposed to take over control. But then once L. Ron Hubbard died, Miscavige realized he had to figure out how to take out Pat Broker, and he did. He succeeded in taking out Pat Broker. That is how. So it's like they were working together against LRH in the beginning, and then when LRH died, then he had to take out Pat. Like it's like
Right,
it's
he was
made
like,
for a
"I need
movie.
you, but then I'm gonna ditch you once I don't need you anymore."
Exactly.
Whoa, they were, like, teaming up like hyenas on L. Ron Hubbard, and then basically that's, like, how I'm viewing it. Total hyenas looking at the prey, and then once David was like, "Cool, I got this.
Yeah.
Bye."
So what's interesting, I hope you find this interesting. So for those
I will.
last 6 years, Miscavige more or less was he didn't have an official position that made him in charge of all of Scientology. But
Right.
he was just a very senior guy with a particular mission that he was assigned. But because he had this exclusive access to L. Ron
Mhm.
Hubbard via Pat Broker, it sort of made him de facto in charge, right? And
Got you.
so for these last 6 years, though, Pat Broker was off with L. Ron Hubbard. So Pat Broker wasn't involved in running Scientology. Pat Broker was just in it for, he got used to like living on L. Ron Hubbard's money and living on a horse farm and buying horses. So by the
Wow.
time L. Ron Hubbard died, Pat Broker just wanted to keep, fucking off and messing around with horses and money. Miscavige
Right.
is the one who wanted all the power and the control.
Uh-huh.
And Pat Broker didn't want to run Scientology. He wanted to go off and be a horse guy.
Interesting. So he didn't even really care. He was like,
He didn't really care, but have you heard of like Scientology's confidential OT levels where you learn about Xenu and the body thetans and all that stuff?
you
Have
know
you?
what? Yes, I have, but I don't know too much about it. I don't know too much about the Xenu aspect
So
of it.
so, but that we won't get into the details of all that. It's just the confidential levels, right? But part of the
Okay.
mystique, part of the mystery, and part of the
Uh-huh.
the belief system of Scientology is that in addition to these OT levels that Scientologists can do right now and pay money for, it goes up to OT8. That before
Okay.
L. Ron Hubbard died, he wrote up all the levels up to OT15 and had them tucked away in some secure place. And the way Pat Broker kept control for a couple years was he told David Miscavige, I have the upper unreleased OT levels and you don't have them. I have them. And so as long as Miscavige thought that was true, he couldn't get rid of Pat Broker. And so one time
Wow.
Miscavige orchestrated a raid of the ranch and any storage facilities where Pat Broker it was believed he had these things. It was only once David Miscavige called Pat Broker's bluff and found out L. Ron Hubbard didn't leave behind anything like that he was like, the jig's up, buddy. You're out of here. And he was he sort of threatened to turn Pat Broker into the IRS for I don't know if laundering is the right word, but basically massive violations of the IRS tax code on how they handled the money with L. Ron Hubbard. And he basically threatened to have Pat Broker thrown into prison by turning him into the IRS. And Pat was like, all right, fine. You can have control. I'll go away. Pat Broker is still alive. He's still out there. He's never spoken. He's never spoken.
Is he with the horses?
I don't know if he's a horse guy, though. I don't know.
I'm like, all I want to know is if he's still a horse guy. What is he doing? Is he watching David like, what the fuck?
Whatever documentary company hunts down Pat Broker and gets him to go on the record is going to win an Oscar.
Oh my God. He's never even, is he still in Scientology?
No, he's been out of Scientology since like 88. He's never spoken out.
I am so curious what he has to say about David, for example.
Believe me, I don't know. Like Dave must be giving him a bunch of money to get him to shut up for all these years, or there's like, but anyway, it's a crazy story. So you had Pat and Dave exploiting L. Ron Hubbard's weakness,
right?
And then
hyenas.
Yeah, I think Dave was just much more vicious and ambitious than Pat Broker. I mean, in many ways, I've heard Pat Broker was actually quite a loser. I mean, even in the Sea Org.
Okay.
And that the reason he and Annie went off with L. Ron Hubbard was mostly because they could be spared and not because they were some fantastic, resources or something like that.
So interesting. It seems like David was just, I mean, maybe Pat was kind of piggybacking off of David's predatory behavior, but not really like a
Yeah.
predator per se. And then he really got to see pretty quickly who the predator
Yeah.
actually was.
It
And then
turns out
David
that
just
it was
turned
Pat.
around.
It turns out that Pat's wife Annie is the one
Yeah.
that L. Ron Hubbard really, really trusted, and
Okay.
and Pat just happened to be her husband. And that even in the last
Interesting.
6 and even in the last 6 to 12 months of L. Ron Hubbard's life, from what I'm told, he basically banished Pat. He's like, "Get out of here. I don't want to see you. I don't want you around."
Wait, for real?
Yeah, yeah,
That
yeah.
Pat's like really got like pushed aside. Like Pat was not getting any love, it feels like. Pat was
That's right.
just
So he was no
a
match.
disposable.
He was no real match for David Miscavige, really.
No, no. David's like, I'm on to Tom Cruise. Like, Pat, you're nothing compared to Tom Cruise. Like, sorry. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. You do not cut it when it's compared to Tom Cruise.
Yeah,
That was actually one
exactly.
of my questions to you. Like, it's just so wild to see how Scientology in general preys on celebrities. And like what it seems like with Scientology specifically, unlike other cults, like other cults will really prey upon, you know, people's devotion, which I do think that at a large, that is what Scientology is doing with most of its members. He gets them like super devoted and feeling like they're doing the right thing for humanity, etc. But with celebrities, David really understands how to prey on narcissism, in my opinion. He's another thing that we would be like, oh, okay, that's a strength. Like that person really can go out and be a public speaker and start this business. David's over there going, that's a weakness. And that's something I can exploit and use for my own personal gain. And like with the celebrity centers that I pass by in LA, it's so obvious. Like I've never seen a celebrity center before. That is the most sus thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Like, why are you segregating? It feels like segregation. Like, what? Why is there a space that's only for celebrities? And it says celebrity. It
It's a little on
literally
the
says
nose,
it.
isn't it? It's a little on the
It's a
nose.
it is, and that's the problem with celebrities is it's not necessarily, it's not that they are necessarily narcissists per se, but they are so used to being taken care of and like kind of praised and people laughing at their jokes when things aren't even funny, that when something like Scientology comes around, they're so used to that type of behavior towards them that they feel very comfortable in those spaces. So they're actually going to let their guard down even more so in those spaces because it's basically like being on set, honestly, for celebrities. That's set life for them. You know, like whoever's the top of the call sheet, everyone treats that person a specific way. So then you got Scientology, you know, again, preying on that aspect. It's super dangerous. Then you got John Travolta up in there holding the cans and like, you know, feeling super special because he's felt that way for quite a bit because the industry does broom people into that type of behavior as well. Like some people start off as narcissists. I do think that exists, but then also I think the industry can definitely breed narcissism in general. And just seeing that with David, I really see him finding that as something that he can exploit and use
Yeah.
financially also. They're really giving a whole bunch of donations.
Well, I'll tell you, you know, when you walk into Scientology, and this is true for
Yeah.
non-celebrities, but I imagine it might even be more impactful for celebrities. When you do these introductory level courses, some of the first information that's being presented to you is along the lines of there's these antisocial personalities that are that are parasitic, and they leech off of you, and they try to ride your coattails while at the same time trying to tear you down. And if you're an actor or an actress or an entertainer in the industry, you're like, oh yeah, there really are,
Oh,
there really are,
totally.
because of course there are.
Totally. There
But when
are,
this
yes. And one of them is
organization,
David. I'm kidding.
that's right. And so Scientology is saying these these elements are in your life and they're dangerous, and we can give you the tools and we can help you spot them and we can help you get rid of such people or fix such people. And of course, it makes it harder to go, oh yeah, but you guys are those people.
It's like you don't even notice David standing right there. That's so interesting, actually, because it's, again, that whole isolation tactic that predators love to do. Because if you think about in the wild too, they try to get their prey isolated. Like, that's what they do. So it's the same, even socially speaking, or mentally speaking. They really try to isolate their prey, and they're doing that to someone even like Tom Cruise, for example. Yeah. It's the same tactic. There is an enemy. There's something that's draining you, taking your source away from you, etc. And we can help combat that. And you're like, oh, but that also kind of sounds like a pyramid scheme, because really what should be happening is I should have the strength and understanding after those courses to realize that Scientology is doing the exact thing that they're trying to talk about.
That's
like,
right. Well, I've heard some people say that, the end result of Scientology is leaving Scientology, because you'll eventually realize that everything you're being warned about is exactly what you're involved in.
That's it. They're literally putting their own demise, in their text, basically. It's like, after a while, you start to go, parasitic, interesting, like abusive, interesting. Why does that sound so familiar?
Yeah.
Oh, it's happening to me right here. So I have a question. What year did you get out? How did you get out of there?
So now remember, I was in the Sea organization, and leaving the Sea organization is different than leaving Scientology.
Got you.
So leaving the Sea, you can leave the Sea organization and still be a Scientologist. So, for example, right? So there's public Scientologist, there's staff member, and then there's Sea Org member. And you can go public are the people who pay to do Scientology, and they don't technically work for Scientology. And then staff members are people who work for Scientology days, nights, or weekends, but they live in the real world. They don't sign the billion-year contract. The Sea Org members are the ones who sign the billion-year contract.
By the way, billion years, you guys. They need to relax on that. That's a little too long contracts freak me out in general. You put billion years in there and I'm running. I'm freaked out. I'm like, even a 2-year contract freaks me out. Billion years.
Billion years. Those are rookie numbers. They need to go 2 billion. 2 billion.
Yeah, true. Sorry, go ahead.
So the Sea Org members are the ones, you don't live in the outside world. You don't have a life outside of Scientology. You 24/7, 365, other than the hours you happen to sleep. Like, there's no such thing as time off the clock. If you're off the clock, it's because you're sleeping. It's not, you have 3 hours a week to do your laundry. You have to get special approval just to see your family on Christmas, So these are the guys who form all of continental management, middle management, and international management. All of Scientology management is composed of Sea Org members.
Okay.
And and you're not allowed to have children in the Sea Org. So
wait, you're not allowed to have children. Why?
Not allowed to have children because it's a distraction. So this is why if you hear Scientology stories and you hear about people being coerced into having abortions, those are Sea Org members.
Oh, right? I see. Okay.
So oftentimes these days, Sea Org members, if they get pregnant, they're either pressured to have an abortion or they can leave the Sea Org. So that's what happened to my wife and I. So in 2006, and Sea Org members can only obviously have relationships with other Sea Org members.
These rules are so intense.
Well, you live in dormitories that are just in Sea Org owned buildings. Like, you don't have a life out. Everything is Sea Org. Everything is Scientology.
Right.
So in 2006, my wife and I got pregnant and we left the Sea Org. In 2009, I started my path out of Scientology, like really looking up the negative stuff online and, coming to realize there's no upper OT levels. All David Miscavige is not a nice guy, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Oh no.
It wasn't until 2014 that I officially left Scientology. So,
were you scared?
Well, I was sort of in denial the entire time. Like, what happened is, a couple years earlier in 2012, my mom had gotten like officially kicked out of Scientology for talking smack about David Miscavige to other Scientologists. Now, as you might have, recall from the Scientology and the Aftermath show, when someone's expelled from Scientology, all of the Scientologists have to disconnect from them completely.
Horrible.
So the Scientology authorities basically told me I had to disconnect from my mom. And I wasn't going to do that, but I lied my ass off to everybody and told them that I was doing that and pretended like I was doing that. Because at that time, you realize this is what happens with second and third and fourth generation Scientologists. By that time, me and my wife were both Scientologists. Her parents were Scientologists. Her brothers and sisters were Scientologists. All her nieces and nephews were Scientologists. We both worked for Scientologists. Our kids were going to a Scientology school. Like, there's no day that's the day that you wake up and is like, you know what? I think today's the day that I want to lose everything I've ever known.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. So that's even when I no longer believed any part of Scientology and I was secretly feeding information to Mike Rinder and Marty Rathbun, like I was being a spy, right?
That's me.
That's totally sick,
actually. That's badass, actually. That's amazing. Good for you. I feel like I would do the same thing, honestly. I'd probably be the same way.
I know, it's the best way to be.
Totally. You're like, and then you're just like
so, but even during that time, I wanted to keep being a spy. I didn't want to get kicked out of Scientology because I was going to lose everything I knew.
Right.
When I say everything I knew, I don't mean Scientology. I mean my friends and my family members and my job.
That's horrible. That's horrible.
And so I was in total denial that they would ever actually kick me out. But eventually, Scientologists spy on each other. So our nanny was a Scientologist. She would talk to our kids to try to figure out if they were still seeing their grandmother. She was reporting back to Scientology that they were. Really despicable shit. Really despicable shit.
Wait, they were literally communicating with your children.
Yeah. Spying on us through talking to our kids, because our kids were so young. We never told them, hey, you're not allowed to tell anyone that you see your grandmother. You're not allowed. That's a secret. We never told them that.
Right.
And we never would have told them that because that would be really psychologically damaging. Hey,
yeah.
So anyway,
they can't even comprehend what that even means. Like that's So
Scientology would keep trying to confront me with this stuff, and I would just keep lying and lying and lying. And eventually they're like, this guy's just going to keep lying to us, right? And they're like, yeah, he's definitely just going to keep lying to us about this. And they're like, all right, he's out. You got to go.
You got to go.
Yeah. You cannot stay here. Yeah. So, but then they go to my wife. Yeah. So then they go to my wife and they're like, well, you've got to divorce Aaron or you're going to get kicked out. And she's like, well, that's not going to work for me. So then she gets kicked out. So then they go to her parents and say, well, you got to disconnect from Heather and your granddaughters or you're going to get kicked out. And they're like, well, we got 2 other daughters and a son and other grandkids. Like, sorry, we're disconnecting. And, I'm being kind of quick and superficial in my description here, but it really was a thoroughly soul crushing and soul destroying experience where to be perfectly honest, she and I were both in denial every step of the way. Like, this isn't really going to happen. They're just, this isn't really going to happen. This isn't it's like driving towards a cliff and being like, we'll probably just fly once we get off the edge of that cliff. Right. We're not really going to fall. Right. And that's, there's more to the story. That's kind of the abbreviated Cliff Note version. But
it's horrible though. This is horrible what they do to families though.
That
was something. That really, I mean, I was crying watching. I just finished season 1 of the Leah Remini show Aftermath. And I mean, I was crying for most of it. It was very heartbreaking.
Yeah.
How these families are getting disconnected like this and how they'll stay in it and keep also. Wait, can we also just talk about this really quickly? How much money it takes to be a Scientologist?
Yeah. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, at least.
I saw like average is $200,000.
Oh, yeah. To get to the top of the bridge through OT8. I mean, these days you'd be probably lucky to get away with less than 400,000,
I actually made one of my protest signs. Wait, what is it? What is it? The bridge towards freedom? What is it called again?
The bridge to total freedom.
Yeah, I put the bridge to total bankruptcy. I made my own bridge for the protest sign, but it really was shocking to me that that's how much money, because there's not that many cults where that much money is needed. Sometimes there's a lot of like leeway where, like, for example, if someone's doing labor for free at Scientology, do they get free courses, or is that not how David works?
So as long as you're under your contract, you're getting your courses for free. But in the Sea organization, you can't fulfill your contract ever because it's a billion-year contract. So when me and my wife left the Sea organization,
Yes.
I had been on staff since I was a kid, but I didn't join the Sea Org until I was 22. So I was in the
Okay.
Sea Org for 4 years. My wife was in the Sea Org for 14 years. That's making no money during those years. When we left, we paid them
No.
$40,000.
Wait, no, you did. Wait, why'd you have to pay them?
You get given a bill for all the services you did. You're a freeloader. They call you a freeloader.
No.
They say you joined the Sea Org just to get free auditing and training, and so now you owe us for all that money.
And they can actually do that? That's an actual.
Well, it's not a legal debt. It's more like a religious debt. So if you want to continue
Right.
being a Scientologist, you have to pay the
Right.
debt.
Right, because you can't do anything with
Exactly.
Scientology if you don't pay that.
Exactly.
Wow.
That was the negotiated down version. That was the hey, we've got a special discount for you this week. If you pay it this week, we'll cut it down to 40,000. I mean, it was closer to 100,000. Yeah.
That is, I mean, how much is Scientology like worth? Like, what's the net worth? Like, what?
At least a few
How
billion
rich
at
is
this point.
David?
At least a few $billion organizationally at this point. Yeah. It's incredible.
I mean, didn't L. Ron? Is it a true quote with L. Ron Hubbard that he said like you can't make any money on science fiction books? You have to make like a religion. Is that like a true quote of L. Ron Hubbard?
You know, it's been so widely reported. I'm going to say I'm assuming it is true. There's no way
Okay.
for anyone to know for sure because it's an anecdote that was told. My
Right,
response to that anecdote is he's quoted as saying that back when he was still writing, Pulp Fiction stories before he ever wrote
Uh-huh.
Dianetics. And when he wrote Dianetics in 1950, that was marketed and billed as a science. He was still very anti-religion in 1950. So
Okay.
Scientology was created in 1954. Dianetics was in 1950. So if we say that's a true quote, that still wasn't his first thing he tried. He tried Dianetics. Dianetics made a lot of money, but then he went broke,
Right.
and then he switched over to what he called the religion angle. And
Interesting.
yes, and
Was
that's
like
when
Dianetics like more psychological? Like it was just more mental health?
it was
Like
supposed to be a
as
mental science, a mental
Got it.
therapy.
Got it.
In Dianetics, he didn't talk about or believe in past lives. He didn't talk about or believe in spiritual beings. Everything was mental. Everything was couched in terms of science.
Interesting.
And
And
so
then he's like, that didn't make me any money.
Well, actually, he
So-
made a shitload of money in Dianetics, but he's also horrible with money. So he squandered it all, and Dianetics went, the Dianetics foundations went bankrupt and everything. And then, Scientology sort of came about in a way when he started talking about past lives. So now we started talking about spiritual beings. Well, now it went into something that was more spiritual or religious-y, and no longer
Right.
just talking about mental, just the mind or just science. I mean, there's not much science in Dianetics, but it's called the book is called Dianetics, the Modern Science of Mental Health.
Got it. Oh,
Where-
okay. I didn't know that last part. That's right.
Yes.
So yeah, that was more the mental health angle. And then it wasn't until after that he went down, like made his sci-fi books real, kind of.
Yes.
That's feels like he just was like, I'm gonna take a little bit of all the sci-fi that I wrote and
That's
just
right.
kind of mold it into something that's maybe somewhat believable.
That's right.
Maybe. Was he
Yeah.
sober? Like,
Not like straight edge. Like he wasn't necessarily against drinking.
okay.
There's
When did
plenty of
the
anecdotes of
anti-
him drinking.
like when did the anti drugs thing, etc. happen?
Oh. So Scientologists are
Yeah.
completely and rabidly against pharmaceutical medications.
Oh,
They're against
okay,
psychiatry.
against big
They're against
pharma.
They're against psychiatry and psychology. So, and there's an anti-medicine bias, but it's not against the rules in Scientology to drink alcohol. And you can't get in
Okay.
trouble for taking Advil or antibiotics or
Got you.
vaccines. You can go to the doctor. It's not like Christian Science or something.
Okay.
But they are rabidly against any forms of mental health that are not Scientology.
Oh, because
And in
they
fact,
again they want to funnel them there.
Yeah. Well, they've got all sorts of alien-based conspiracy theories as to why psychiatry is bad. But so actually
What?
seeing don't let's not even get started on that for this video. But like
I'm coming back. Aaron, I'm
yeah.
coming back for that.
So it's so strong that if you're seeing a psychiatrist for, let's say, a couple years, and if you're on like an antidepressant for a couple years, they call you an illegal pre-clear. You're actually disqualified from getting any Scientology auditing for the rest of this lifetime. So like Scientologists see psychiatry as being something truly, truly dangerous. Like Scientology used to hold events. They would literally announce how many psychiatrists they got sent to prison that year. That's how much they hate psychiatry or
Wait,
mental.
are you serious?
100% serious.
That's interesting because I feel like the reason for that might be because since it is like a cult, in my opinion, they don't want anyone being dependent on anything else but Scientology. So anything that can alleviate maybe emotional pain, for example, they want Scientology to be that. And
Yep.
so they see that as like competition. They're like,
Yeah,
it's
pretty
like
much.
competition for them.
It's true. It's true. I agree
Right.
with you. Like I
They're
said,
like,
there's some real alien-based conspiracy theories that all the psychiatrists come from the planet Farsec and all this kind of shit. And that, they believe in they call them the implant stations that are like the between lives area. When you die, you drop this body and you're sort of pre-programmed to shoot over to the implant station that are run by the alien psychiatrists, and they wipe your memory and shoot you down into a new body. And the Earth is a prison planet. And Scientology is like Morpheus and Neo trying to unplug everyone from the Matrix to be able to skip the between lives area. Oh yeah, we could have some fun videos.
Wait, first of all, this sounds kind of interesting. To be honest, my 15-year-old self that was like watching random conspiracy videos on YouTube right now is like, what? Like, I kind of get the attraction, because especially if your life is feeling dull, for example, with sometimes, you know what I mean? This sounds like actually entertaining.
It's
Like,
why Scientologists get so damn dedicated, because they're like,
We're unplugging people from the Matrix, and you're talking about Shelley Miscavige? Fuck Shelley Miscavige.
You have no idea what we're doing over here, guys.
You don't even get it. Tom Cruise is helping free the planet. Go see Top Gun.
Top Gun coming into all of this is just way too much. It's like my brain can't even handle the fact that Top Gun has anything to do with this.
You can't handle the truth.
Wait, but I have a question though. Like, does that mean that some of the conspiracies get their conspiracies from Scientology? Because some of it's sounding similar to like Prison Planet and the Deep State. And
Scientologists love that shit. Oh, the fact that Alex Jones's website is prisonplanet.com makes Scientologists think, how did Alex Jones learn the truth?
Wait,
how does he know? How does Alex know?
No, this is just crazy sci-fi shit that some predator was like, I can legit make people believe this.
When the Matrix came out, this is when the Wachowski sisters were still the Wachowski brothers. Scientologists were like, how did they know? How did they learn the truth? Are they Scientologists? Tom Cruise is Neo. David Miscavige is Morpheus.
Wait, that is actually the funniest thing I've ever heard, to be quite honest with you. That their brain probably broke when they saw Alex Jones doing his thing.
Yes, they love that guy.
Did David Miscavige like freak out? Like, he just like flipped a table? Like,
look,
how was Alex Jones spying?
There were books written by an author named Jim Mars, or James Mars, or Jim Mars. One was called Ruled by Conspiracy. The other one was called Alien Agenda. This book talks all about the international bankers, the Rothschilds, but it also talks about the theory that the moon is actually a hollow spaceship.
Oh, I've heard this. These like the dark side of the moon.
Yes, these books were
Yeah.
mandatory reading for Scientology's Office
No,
of
it wasn't.
Special Affairs staff. Yes. As a Sea Org member, this book was given to me to read by OSA.
Wait,
So
what were you thinking when you were like, this is kind of sick, actually? Like, I'm not
I
gonna lie.
love
Like,
that. I love that shit. I loved it. I was like, yes, I knew we were doing something important. Yes, I knew there was a reason I gave up all of my worldly possessions to work for this, do this fucking job 7 days a week. You know?
that's what's so interesting though, is because like someone like you and I, like I was also in a different type of cult for like a very short period of time, which was called Kundalini Yoga. Which I'm sure, did you ever hear about Kundalini Yoga?
If there's a Netflix documentary about it, then maybe. But if not, then no.
You know what? No, that's being made actually. I think it's going to be on HBO, not Netflix. So
Okay.
that's a little whiles away. But basically, Yogi Bhajan was the same type of person as like an L. Ron Hubbard. And he came up with like all of these like breath techniques and these texts. And for example, everything that Yogi Bhajan said had to be recorded at all times. Very similar. Like and there's like thousands of texts because they were literally recording every single thing that came out of his mouth. Even if he was like, I'm gonna go get a taco, they're like, he's gonna go get a taco. Like, we're etching that in. Like literally everything about Yogi Bhajan. And my husband, that's actually how I met my husband, was I met him in a cult. And we exited that cult together safely, and it wasn't something like Scientology where there were layers to like having to get out of that. There was no disconnection phase, none of that. But extremely similar. And with Yogi Bhajan, it was the same thing. Like the deep state was kind of involved. There was like the constellation thing, and like everything was kind of sci-fi. Like, and for me, I found that fun. Like they got me right away. Honestly, I was like, whoa, the moon's not really the moon, and like the aliens are preying on our energy sources. And I actually was down with that for a short period of time. I get it. And when you feel like, I don't know, my personality type, and maybe it's similar to yours, like I want to do good on this planet. Like I've always felt that way. Like I just always wanted to be part of like human connection, and just doing something that felt very meaningful to me. And so I think they prey on that aspect, especially like, you know, cults. They're like, oh, somebody wants to do good, which we would see as a strength again. They see it as a total weakness, and they use that against us. And it's so sad because I think spiritual abuse is one of the worst kinds. Just because it really fucks you up.
Yeah, and well, feeding the
It really
members
fucks
these
you up.
grand conspiracy theories that are so
Yes.
much greater than you are
Right.
allows, I can tell you that at least in the C organization, when members
Right.
start to go, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to do this
Yeah.
anymore. It's easy to go, but we're not doing this for us. Remember,
Right.
this is a prison planet, and only Scientology can wake people up and unplug people from the Matrix. So but if you take the movie The Matrix as an example, the real world is a terrible place to be. It's a terrible existence. It's disgusting.
Right.
It's dangerous. It's all this stuff. It's much more
Right.
pleasant to be in the Matrix. So to be plugged in. And so,
Right.
you know, the Sea Org members see themselves as the ones who are taking on the burden of simply having been the earliest ones, the first people on this planet to be unplugged. And if you have to live a miserable existence, and if you have to never have kids, and if you have to work 18 hours a day, and if you have to never
Wow.
get time off, that's the burden and the responsibility we have for the knowledge that we have
Right.
of the real state of the world. Everyone else doesn't know. We know. When Tom Cruise, did you ever see that crazy Tom Cruise video where he's in the black turtleneck and he's talking about keeping Scientology working and KSW and
Yes. Yes.
okay.
Yes.
There's a part in this video where he's like, as a Scientologist, when you go by a car accident, it's not like anyone else. You know, you're the only one who can help. This is sort of what he's talking. This is sort of what he's talking about. We
Wow.
have the secret knowledge.
Right.
Everyone else thinks that they do, but they don't really. They're confused. They're deluded. They're trapped in the
Right.
prison. We have a responsibility.
Right. We're free.
So the conspiracy theories actually serve a very
Right.
important function in Scientology and other groups like Scientology. for sure.
It's interesting because what an interesting type of predator it is when it comes to like cult dynamics, because instead of having to chase your prey, you're getting them to be okay with sacrificing themselves to you.
Yeah.
So like you don't even have to be the fastest, predator. You don't have to be the strongest, but you have to be mentally what's the word? I guess the strongest. It's more of a mental game than it is obviously a physical. Because like, when we think about predators, I think about like lions and tigers and bears, But when you think about human type predators, it's more extremely manipulative, strong mind where they can actually like feel like they can convince people to lay themselves down for them. They don't even have to go after them per se.
Yeah. No, I've heard it. I've heard it said that Scientology has a particularly almost somewhat unique system of getting its members to brainwash themselves,
Right.
instead of having to spend so much time doing the brainwashing. And I think that that's always rung true for me. Because I remember when I was in the Sea Org, whenever I didn't really want to be there anymore, I wouldn't go to someone else and be like, I don't want to be here anymore. Can you handle me? I would handle myself. I'd be like, now hold on. What is it you're running into right now? Okay. And why am I doing this in the first place? I was like, I totally forget. Let me try to remember. Why am I doing this? Oh, Prison Planet. Oh, okay. I feel better. I feel better about all the bullshit I'm dealing with right now. Prison Planet's the reason.
Right. No, I get that actually. I actually totally get that, because even when I was doing Kundalini yoga, it was the same type of spiel where I was like, oh, in Kundalini, you couldn't drink, like have a glass of wine. And I really would want to have a glass of wine with dinner. I remember going on a date with my husband and just being like, it would be so nice to have red wine. And I'd be like, no. Like keeping your pure state of minds, like helps your auric field, and you're not going to have the strongest auric field if you drink even one sip of wine. And it's so interesting because it's almost like, it's like the abuser gets planted into your head. You know what I mean? Like, it's almost like they don't even have to exist anymore. And actually, the more I think about that, that happened to me after I got separated from my abuser, where I would see that I was doing things in the same way that he told me it was okay to do. And I was avoiding things that he wasn't comfortable with, even when he wasn't there. And I had to have friends of mine go, this isn't you, Alexa. Like this is very much, Michael. This doesn't seem like it's you. And it was like a year after getting out of that abusive relationship, and I was still almost telling myself I was still there. Like my self-worth was wrapped up in that mentality, and also survival, I guess. I mean, when you got Scientology paying for your living setup, for example, that's scary. That's also financial manipulation, in my opinion.
Totally.
Right?
And so not only are they providing everything for you, but they're also not even paying you enough money to save anything up, even if you're there for 10 years. So, some of these people who want to leave.
Get you.
Yeah. Some of these people who've been there since they were kids, they don't have driver's licenses. They don't have, well, these days they have bank accounts, but they don't have passports. They don't even have enough money to buy a passport, I mean, look, it's textbook human trafficking, and they managed to get away with it under the guise of religion and religious volunteers. It's really disgusting. The fact that our government is set up in a way that this kind of abuse is sort of sanctioned is really, it's a problem.
Yeah, what do we do? Like, have you been thinking about I know Leah Remini's been wrapping her I saw in the documentary, she's like, even when I'm not doing this, I'm thinking about this. And I know, because that's how I am with predators, with predatory behavior in general. Even when I'm not doing the work, I'm still thinking about it. So I'm wondering, like, have you guys thought about what would be the loophole of getting something like Scientology held accountable? Like, what do you have to do? Is it only litigation? Is that really the only option when it comes to something like Scientology?
Well, litigation is civil and prosecution is criminal. And luckily with the Aftermath Foundation, we have a vehicle to help people who are leaving and escaping from the Sea Organization and other echelons of Scientology. And fortunately, one of the things that's enabled us to do is to, when we're helping someone who has documentation of actual crimes the federal government would be interested in prosecuting, we definitely introduce them to the right people and point them in the right direction. So I do think Scientology will lose its tax exempt status. It's hard to put a timeline on it. I do believe that 10 years from now, Scientology could have its tax exemption revoked. I mean, it could be 20 years, it could be 30 years, but I do believe that the type of criminal prosecutions Scientology will, that will hopefully, have a successful conclusion, that they will be found guilty. I think they will be prosecuted under various RICO statutes, and I think they will lose their tax exemption. And I don't think you can get rid of a thing like Scientology, but you can at least take away their tax exemption and put them on equal footing with everyone else, and take away the religious protection that they have in the courts. And then once you lose the religious protection, they can be sued into oblivion. And I think that is exactly what should occur. And I believe that it will actually occur.
I think so too. I mean, especially thinking about how far, like, I heard a little bit about Scientology in the media when Leah Remini left, and that became like a huge splash in the media. But then it kind of like sizzled out again. And then I remember the documentary coming out, and then the HBO documentary coming out, and then it kind of like went back down. And then you got Danny Masterson again, really bringing Scientology back into our cultural discourse. But what I'm worried about is this like media cycle situation that happens. And we see that time and time again, because there's so many predators in the world, to be honest. It's like on a wash. But what happens with that is within 24 hours, people are losing sight of these topics. And so I'm like, I don't want anyone to forget, about the horrific things that Scientology has done to so many individuals. Like, we cannot forget this. Like, I can't, like, I literally, when I go to bed at night, I look into my husband, I'm like, Scientology is still here. Like, I'm freaked out. I'm legit freaked out by it, because it seems just like a massive predator. And it's a predator that's allowed, tax exemption, like allowed all these privileges in a way that's so dangerous. When you got a predator and then you got all of these privileges mixed into it, it is extremely dangerous. And the one thing I wanted to ask you was, you can go to the police, but does it seem like the LAPD has been wrapped up with Scientology, or has that been more of a disconnection as of late?
No, the LAPD still doesn't really give a damn about Scientology. I mean, Leah did a video about that. Even within the past week, she did a video talking about the details of her going and meeting with the LAPD Chief Moore, and he just kind of like shrugged his shoulders and was like, I mean, who cares? Like, there's just been so much corruption. Scientology literally funnels money to the LAPD. They do
That's what I'm at. Okay,
they do annual fundraisers for the LAPD at the Celebrity Center. I mean, it's ridiculous. One of the ways Scientology helps the police, including here in Clearwater, Florida, where I live, they have cameras, high def, ultra high zoom cameras all over their properties. They will bend over backwards to help the police solve crimes, as long as it doesn't involve Scientologists. So if any crime occurs in downtown Clearwater, the police go right to Scientology and be like, hey, you got anything on your cameras, this location, this date, this time? And the Scientology be like, absolutely, officer. It would be our pleasure to assist you with this investigation. Just don't ask them for the footage if it involves a Scientologist. All of a sudden, it's like, who, where, what? Oh, the systems were down that day.
Right. I saw that with Shelley Miscavige, that cafe footage that got totally messed up.
Yeah, who knows what happened
they
there.
do that. So what do? They go in there and like fuck up the tapes? Like,
in that case,
who was owned by a Scientologist?
Who even knows what happened there? But the police, it's like the police aren't prepared to take on a fight with Scientology. It's in their best interest to take the money. Who cares? They've got bigger fish to fry. What Scientology does. What Scientology does to its own members is, the LAPD is like, then leave Scientology. It's not our problem. It's your problem.
Right. Right. Because there's this stigma around it also.
Yeah.
When it comes to religion, it's like it's kind of victim blaming. It's the same thing. It's totally victim blaming. It's like, why didn't you get out of there? Why now? Did you report it to the police? It's like the same victim blaming things. Like, you don't understand the manipulation at place with these things. It's so deep.
Yeah.
It's so deep. And if you're a trusting person too, like you're not a predator, it's so much easier for you to get wrapped up into these things. And because you really give people the benefit of the doubt. And I think that's also something that they prey upon is just the fact that most individuals will give people second chances, third chance, fourth chance, you know? And they'll try to see the good. Like I think naturally people do try to see the good in another individual. I don't think a predator does. I think they're looking for strengths and weaknesses, but I think normal people are like, I want to see the good in this person. And that's what's so dangerous about cults
Yeah.
because they'll think, oh, I'm doing it for L. Ron Hubbard to come back, or I'm doing it for Prison Planet, or like, I'm like, and they really believe that.
Yeah.
And to blame them is just so heartbreaking. Like all jokes aside, you know what I mean? Like it's just really heartbreaking because these people are really believing something and
Yeah.
it has to do with doing something good for the planet. They're not being like, oh, I'm part of a cult that wants to like blow up, the planet and harm
That's right.
anyone. They're thinking the opposite.
That's right. And it's also, the thing is like because of everything you just said, most
Mhm.
Scientologists in the world are great people who think they're helping the world. They
I
think they're
know.
helping mankind. And
Yeah.
I got to tell you, the thing you said in this interview has never occurred to me before. They take what we consider to be strengths and they see them as
Yes.
weaknesses to be exploited. That is such an insightful statement, in my opinion. That is exactly what Scientology does with its
Yeah.
members. The fact that they are so altruistic, it should be a
Yes.
strength, but Scientology
Right.
exploits it as a weakness.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And that's why as bystanders, we have to be very weary of these things because I mean, even with, it's like thinking about being a parent. And since I'm a survivor, for example, when I think about how Nova's so trusting and like goes up to people and, wants to hug them. And she's like just a loving kid. But as a survivor now, I'm aware of how someone else, can exploit that kindness and that trust. And I think parents naturally can see the things in their kids that they're protective of, but it's hard for us to think about it in a broader scale when it comes to like something like a cult. I think it's easier to think about our children and predators like that, like priests, for example. We've heard it time and time again. We get the whole gist of that. But people haven't really brought it outside of that space and how like we all can be prey. And I actually made the Sea Organization protest sign and I changed it to Prey Organization. And instead of the seahorse, we put sardines. Just because I really think that contract is a predator's contract with his prey. I mean, it's like for 1 billion years, your life is to this.
Yeah.
And that it's like, it's not a sea organization. It's like, David, let's be real, man. Like, this is a prey organization, big time. And you're having all these people believing that's something good for the planet. And you're taking advantage of that goodness. And that to me is the grossest part of a predator is like they take something so beautiful and pure about a human being and they will not only exploit that, but they'll also destroy it. So that when a person gets out of that space, that part of them is always a little bit tarnished and they're going to be a little less trusting about certain things because of how badly that part of them was exploited. And that's why I find it's as Dave would like to say, a high crime. I find that the highest of crimes, David, because that is the grossest thing you can do to someone is ruin the best parts of them, which is trusting and loving and wanting to do the right thing. Someone who destroys that, man, it's like, ooh, I don't know if the LAPD has any bigger fish to fry. Sorry, but they do. But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's just, and then you get children involved too. And like, that was crazy to me that on the boat there was 9-year-olds, 12-year-olds, getting children involved is just also one of the most grotesque. There's nothing consensual about that.
Yeah. I mean,
When
even
it's being-
Shelley Miscavige, who gets a lot of attention and press. I mean, she was on the ship Apollo with L. Ron Hubbard, I think since she was like 12.
Oh, see, That's so scary because then when David's wanting her to do something, for example, for his own benefit, she's going to be so deeply in she's on the board. She's on like that chessboard big time, and she's playing the piece that she's been placed on basically. And she's thinking it's freedom of choice, but really, how can it be? How can you have a freedom of choice when you were in it before your brain was even fully developed?
Totally true. Totally true. You know, I
Just
just think it's so cool that you're doing this event on Thursday. For some of the
Thank you.
people who are near, you know, Hollywood, Los Angeles, near L. Ron Hubbard Way. So even if someone can't
Yeah.
stay for the full 4 hours, should they show up anyway?
Yes, you can show up for 10 minutes. Just like standing up against this I don't know, it's like a beast in my opinion. Standing up against this beast is just so important that even if you can't come and you're not in Los Angeles, you can get creative and make your own protest sign and, you know, post it on our Reddit page or something like that. Just virtually even protesting and posting it on your Instagram account if you're not present. Any way to show these survivors of Scientology that we care and that they matter. And yeah, I mean, anything that shows that whatsoever, I think is so important. So even if you're only showing up for 10 minutes, it matters. It
That's
really
awesome.
matters.
So what did you say, from 10 to 2?
It's from 12 to 2, but
12
usually
to 2.
it
12
ends
to
up
2.
going a little bit over 3:30.
Okay.
But I like to keep it concise so people can actually show up and be there and not get stuck in traffic in Los Angeles.
Okay, great. And what would be like a successful showing, in your mind? Because whatever it is, I want us to get more.
I know, I know. So, I mean, obviously in Los Angeles, it's hard to get even like organizing protests is hard in general. I've done 30 of them now. And it's extremely difficult to do. So I feel like even when 5 people show up, it's a success. But over 30 is always amazing because then you really kind of feel the crowd and you really feel the power of like, I don't know, community. You really just feel that beautiful, like everyone's voice kind of sounds like a harmony when they're chanting the chants. I just find it so beautiful. So like over 30, it starts to feel really powerful. But now with the internet, that's just like something I use with Eat Predators is I try to combine the protest aspects and then also virtually. So if you can watch the live stream or if you can participate in sharing a reel of the protest, that shows how many people are actually there. Even if they're not physically there, it shows something like Scientology, how many people actually care, even if they're not physically there. So I think a success would be hopefully thousands of people, you know, like being a part of a lot of the live stream of it so that they're like, I'm actually down with this cause. And then people actually showing up, even though there's traffic in Los Angeles and tons of other things to do. Even when you got 5-10 people there, I personally think it's a success because, you know, I just do.
That's great.
I think it's a
There's a
beautiful thing.
lot of former Scientologists who live within a few blocks of that base, believe it or not.
Really?
So is the live stream going to be happening on your YouTube channel?
Yeah, I'm gonna put it I used to put it just on my Instagram, but it's gonna be way easier because like the reels just kind of like disappear. So at least making it a video would feel like a little more, I don't know. I'm hoping it's a little more powerful this time than a reel on
Okay.
Instagram.
So wait, so will it be live streaming on, can you live stream on Instagram?
You can live stream. You can totally live stream, but it's just not you don't like you have to get the notification that someone's going live, and with YouTube at least like your subscribers will most likely see the notification. I found Instagram it's not the same. It's really
Okay.
not the same.
Okay, good. So it'll be on YouTube. Perfect.
Yeah, it will.
So
Yeah.
guys, you can subscribe to Alexa at her channel, Alexa Nikolas, or at Eat Predators, and you can join that live stream. That would be absolutely amazing. And
Thank you so much for having me on here.
yeah, I
It,
hope you get a lot of people turning up. So this Thursday, guys, the 28th, from on L. Ron Hubbard Way, from noon until 2. Even if you can only show up for 10
yeah,
minutes, feel free to show
yeah.
up. And
Please show up.
I'll direct as many people to join the live stream as I can. It should be
Thank
fantastic.
you. Thank you so much. And I'll share definitely all of the I know I sent you 3 of them, but there will be a lot more than that. So I'll send you them as we make them. A lot of work goes into creating the protest signs, surprisingly.
That is so cool.
Behind me.
All right. Well, thank you for joining me, Alexa. This has been a blast.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Aaron. And I'll see you on Thursday. Hopefully you
Absolutely.
watch it.
All right, everyone. Thanks for hanging out with us this afternoon. Thanks, as always, to everyone who watches until the very end. And we'll talk to you soon.
Yes. Talk to you.
If you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, oh, Nancy, Mama, love, then you could click right inside here. If you have subscribed or not, subscribe